Welcome to The Psychology of Us. This podcast is created by R.J. Starr, a public intellectual and independent psychology educator. The material presented is educational and interpretive, examining psychological life as a domain of understanding rather than intervention. It does not provide therapy, diagnosis, or professional guidance. Each episode stands as a complete work of public psychological inquiry.
Welcome to this deep dive. We have some truly fascinating source material to get into today. We're looking at an essay by independent psychology educator Professor R.J. Starr, and it's titled When Thought Becomes Body: Emotional Activation, Predictive Processing, and Meta-Awareness.
It's a brilliant piece of work.
It really is. And our mission for this deep dive is a big one. We are going to fundamentally change how you understand your own emotions.
Right, because we tend to have a very specific view of how feelings work.
Yeah, exactly. We want to move away from this idea that your feelings are just these random, uncontrollable physical eruptions that hijack your day. Instead, we're going to look at them as highly organized sequences built entirely on meaning.
To set the stage for you, think about a scenario that pretty much everyone has experienced. I mean, imagine you're sitting on your couch, totally safe. Maybe you're watching TV and you suddenly get a text from your boss that just says, "Can we chat later?"
Oh, wow. Yeah, just hearing that makes me anxious.
Right. Instantly, your stomach drops, your chest gets tight, your heart rate spikes. Your body is suddenly reacting as if there is a literal predator in the room with you.
Even though you're just on the couch.
Exactly. Even though nothing in your physical environment has actually changed. By the end of our deep dive today, you are going to have the tools to recognize the hidden architecture behind those physical feelings and, more importantly, learn how to intervene when they happen.
I am genuinely thrilled we're covering this. When I was reading through Professor Starr's work, it felt like being handed an operator's manual for my own nervous system.
That's a great way to put it.
Because it takes something that usually feels so chaotic and messy and gives it a very clear, logical structure. And I have to admit, I am definitely someone who gets that sudden spike of panic over a cryptic text message. My brain immediately assumes I'm getting fired.
Well, it is an incredibly relatable reaction. What makes Starr's framework so valuable is that it validates that intense physical experience you're having on the couch, while simultaneously asking you to question where it actually came from.
Right. It doesn't dismiss the feeling.
Not at all. We are going to guide you through the science of how a simple string of words on a screen transforms into a full-blown physiological state.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because Professor Starr kicks off with a core thesis that just completely flips the script on how we usually think about feelings. He writes, "Emotions do not begin in the body. They begin in meaning."
That concept is the foundation of everything we're going to discuss. Usually we operate under the assumption that an event happens and our body just automatically reacts to the event.
Like it's a direct line, action, reaction.
Precisely. But Starr is pointing out that we are skipping a crucial step in that sequence. It is actually a highly structured chain of events. It starts with a narrative.
A story we tell ourselves.
Yes, a thought forms in your mind, often so quickly and quietly you don't even notice it. Then comes the evaluation phase. Your mind assigns significance to that thought. It asks, is this a threat? Is this shameful? Is this uncertain?
So the meaning comes first.
Always. Only after that meaning is assigned does the physiological mobilization happen. That's when your throat tightens, your chest constricts, your palms sweat.
Wait, I have to push back a little here. I get the text message example where I have a second to interpret it. But what if someone brutally cuts me off in traffic?
Okay, the immediate reaction.
Yeah. I am angry instantly. My heart is pounding before I even have time to form a coherent sentence about it. There is no time for a narrative to form. So how does Starr explain that?
It's a great distinction to make. It feels instantaneous because different parts of your brain operate at vastly different speeds. The cortex, which is the thinking, storytelling part of your brain, processes that sudden swerving car and instantaneously evaluates it as a life-threatening danger.
So it happens, it's just incredibly fast.
Exactly. It hands that evaluation down to the amygdala, which acts like your brain's biological alarm system. Now, the amygdala doesn't reason or tell stories. It just sounds the alarm.
It's the panic button.
It flips the switch on your autonomic nervous system, throwing your body into fight or flight mode. It floods you with adrenaline and cortisol. The narrative phase still happened. It just happened at lightning speed.
So my body isn't actually reacting to the car itself.
Right. Your body is not reacting to the car itself. It is reacting to the cortex's lightning-fast interpretation that you are about to die.
Wow. That makes a lot of sense.
Right.
The body is acting on the story the brain just told it. It's wild to realize that the physical reaction is secondary.
It completely shifts your perspective.
It really does. The body isn't reacting to external reality. It is reacting to the meanings the mind has constructed about that reality.
What's fascinating here is the concept of the brain as a predictive organ. The brain is not just a passive recorder of events, like a video camera documenting what is happening right in front of you.
It's actively guessing.
It is a prediction machine. It is continuously generating simulations of possible futures and replaying fragments of the past. It generates hypotheses about what is likely to occur next, so it can prepare you to survive it.
And the source text gives some really powerful examples of this simulation in action. Starr mentions anticipatory grief, the anxiety you feel sitting in a waiting room before getting a medical result, or the dread you feel the night before you have to have a difficult conversation with a partner.
Those are perfect examples.
Because none of these things have actually happened yet. But the body is treating them like they are happening right now. It is incredible that imagined futures can produce real, tangible physiology.
We call that top-down processing in psychology. The brain's higher-level predictions dictate the body's lower-level biological responses. The body does not wait for confirmation from the outside world before it acts. Meaning alone is enough of a trigger.
So the simulation itself is the threat.
Exactly. If that simulated future conversation with your partner carries enough symbolic threat, the alarm system mobilizes you. Your pulse accelerates because of anticipation. Your posture destabilizes because of a memory.
A purely symbolic threat in your mind triggers authentic physical fear in your body.
Yes. The body doesn't know the difference between a physical bear and a psychological threat.
But the illusion is just so convincing. I mean, when I feel anxious about that hypothetical conversation, it feels purely physical. My stomach drops, my chest gets incredibly tight.
It feels like an undeniable reality.
It does. It doesn't feel like a narrative or a simulation. It feels like my body is screaming a fundamental truth at me about reality.
This is where a biological mechanism called interoception comes into play. Interoception is your brain's capacity to sense internal bodily states.
Okay, like an internal radar.
Just like you have sensory receptors to feel a hot stove, you have internal sensory receptors tracking your heart rate, the depth of your breath, the tension in your muscles, and the state of your digestion. All of that internal data gets continuously relayed upward into your conscious awareness.
So to map this out, my storyteller brain generates a scary thought about tomorrow's conversation.
Right.
My alarm system reacts by making my heart pound and my chest tight. And then my internal sensors feel my heart pounding and report that back to the brain.
The brain then treats that pounding heart as hard evidence that the initial scary thought was absolutely correct. The mind registers that physical sensation and essentially says, look at this data. My chest is tight and my heart is racing. Something terrible really is happening.
It validates its own anxiety?
Precisely. The physical state reinforces the original cognitive appraisal. The loop closes. Meaning throws your body into fight or flight mode, and that physical state feeds back into meaning, making the anxious thought feel totally justified and real.
It is a complete self-sustaining feedback loop. And because those physical sensations are so loud and immediate and uncomfortable, we naturally give them way more authority than the quiet little thought that actually started the whole cascade.
We completely misattribute the source.
We walk around thinking the emotion came from the body, when really, the body is just acting as a literal interpreter of the thought.
This raises an important question, though. If emotions are just constructed from the meanings we assign to things, it explains a phenomenon we see all the time. Think about how two different people can face the exact same external event, but have completely different physiological responses to it.
Oh, let's use the classic workplace example. Two different people get called into their boss's office unexpectedly on a Friday afternoon.
The external event is identical. The environment is the same. But the cognitive appraisal, the meaning assigned to the event, is entirely different.
Person A versus person B.
Exactly. Person A interprets the uncertainty as a possibility. They think maybe this is about that new project I pitched, or maybe it's a promotion.
So their body reacts to that positive story.
Yes. Their storyteller brain hands a positive narrative down to the alarm system. Their nervous system might gear up with a slight hum of excitement or focused alertness.
And then there's person B.
Person B interprets the uncertainty as a severe threat. Their brain immediately predicts they are getting fired. Their alarm system triggers a massive stress cascade. Sweaty palms, racing heart, tunnel vision.
The divergence isn't in the event itself.
No, it is entirely in the interpretation layered upon it.
That is such a crucial takeaway for anyone listening. The system coheres around meaning. Once you recognize that your emotional life unfolds through these identifiable structured mechanisms, rather than just being some mysterious, unavoidable weather system that rolls in and ruins your day, it changes everything.
It is the first major movement toward emotional maturity, as Starr defines it in the essay. It replaces the assumption that emotion just happens to you with the awareness that emotion is organized by you.
It gives you some power back.
It does. And here is the key takeaway from the text. What is organized can, at certain moments, be observed.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's pivot to this concept of meta-awareness from the text. Professor Starr makes a really sharp distinction between immersion and observation.
Immersion is how most of us experience emotional activation almost all the time. A thought arises, the body mobilizes, and you experience the state entirely from the inside.
You're completely lost in it.
There is no gap between you and the feeling. You essentially become the state of fear or grief or anger. The identification with the emotion is completely seamless. You don't say, I am experiencing anger. You say, I am angry.
But meta-awareness is a different state entirely. If immersion is being swept away by the river, meta-awareness is standing on the riverbank watching the water rush by.
That's a great visual.
You notice the tightening in your chest. You notice the acceleration of your breath. You might even notice the specific thought that preceded the physical feeling. You are still activated, but you aren't fully fused with the emotion anymore.
You recognize that what is occurring is an internally generated sequence, not necessarily an external event unfolding in real time.
You see the machinery working.
Exactly. We need to clarify a crucial distinction from Starr's text here, though. Observation does not erase the emotion. It alters your relationship to it. The discomfort is still present, but you are no longer swallowed by it.
I think a lot of people might confuse observation with suppression. When we talk about stepping back and observing an emotion, it sounds a bit like saying, I'm going to detach and just push this uncomfortable feeling away.
They are entirely different structural movements, and Starr is very clear about this. Suppression is an attempt to push the emotion out of awareness entirely.
Like on a beach ball underwater.
Right. When you suppress, you actually narrow and constrict your attention in defense. You tense up, trying to avoid the discomfort. Observation, on the other hand, expands your attention.
You let the beach ball float, but you look at the whole ocean?
You widen your focus so that the discomfort can be seen within a broader field of awareness. One narrows in defense, the other widens in clarity.
Widening in clarity. I think such a great picture. The anxious narrative is still there, the pounding heart is still there, but it's no longer the only thing present in your universe. You introduce psychological space.
And within that newly created psychological space, a subtle, fragile hinge moment appears. Professor Starr calls this the choice point.
The choice point. It sounds very dramatic, almost cinematic.
It does, but the text points out that it actually doesn't feel dramatic at all in practice.
Right. It's usually not this grand moment of supreme confidence. It's just a quiet, fleeting recognition that an emotion is building.
You notice the thought is intensifying. You feel the body mobilizing.
And right at that hinge, two very different pathways diverge.
Let's look closely at those two diverging pathways. The first is elaboration. If you go down the elaboration path, your attention narrows tightly around the activating narrative.
You lean into the story.
You start attaching more interpretations and past grievances to the story. The imagined scenario in your head gets more detailed, more textured, more catastrophic.
So if you're angry about a work email, elaboration is when you start replaying every other annoying thing that coworker has done over the past year.
Yes. And as that story gets more convincing and detailed, your alarm system commits even more resources to the simulation. Your physical activation increases.
Your fear sharpens, your anger expands, your grief deepens.
You are actively feeding the feedback loop. That is elaboration. You are throwing fuel on the fire.
And the second pathway.
The second pathway at the choice point is widening. In this pathway, your attention broadens. You intentionally include other sensory input into your awareness to break the immersion.
What does that actually look like practically? I mean, if someone listening wants to try widening the next time they feel that spike of panic, how do they do it?
It requires a deliberate shift in physical focus. So the next time that cryptic email makes your chest tight or someone cuts you off in traffic, pause.
Don't just react.
Don't engage with the story your brain is telling you about the event. Instead, Look around and name 3 physical objects in the room. Notice the color of the wall. Feel the physical sensation of your feet resting on the floor. Pay attention to the temperature of the air on your skin.
Just bringing in raw data from the present.
That breaks the immersion. You are proving to your nervous system that you are in a safe physical environment right here, right now.
Because you aren't hyper-focusing on the narrative and you are bringing in data from the actual physical room, the nervous system is allowed to settle incrementally.
You aren't amplifying the simulation
We're
anymore.
essentially telling your alarm system, stand down, the threat is just a thought.
Now, it is absolutely essential to emphasize Professor Starr's point here. Neither of these pathways, elaboration or widening, is inherently correct or superior to the other.
I will admit, that part of the essay surprised me.
How so?
Well, based on how we usually talk about mental health, you would assume widening is always the ultimate goal. Why would you ever want to elaborate and make yourself feel worse?
It is a very common misconception that regulation means always calling down. But Starr argues that sometimes elaboration is entirely necessary.
Necessary to feel the pain.
Yes, emotional experience requires full contact to metabolize certain major life events. If you suppress or constantly try to widen away from deep grief after a loss in the name of looking composed, you can actually harden your nervous system over time.
That makes sense. You have to process it eventually.
Avoiding anger can severely distort your personal boundaries, allowing people to walk all over you. Refusing to feel fear can lead to a delayed collapse later on. Sometimes you need to let the system fully engage with the narrative to process it.
But on the flip side, sometimes pacing is essential because our emotional systems have physical limits.
They absolutely do.
If you sustain high activation, constantly elaborating on every minor annoyance or anxiety, you basically burn out your nervous system's battery.
In those moments of overwhelm, widening your attention and interrupting that narrative escalation is necessary just to preserve your basic daily coherence.
The beauty of recognizing the choice point isn't that it magically eliminates your vulnerability to feeling anxious or angry.
No, it introduces agency within the vulnerability.
You don't get to control whether the emotion arises in the first place. The thoughts will form, the alarm system will mobilize. That is simply how human beings are built.
Agency appears after the activation begins. You get to decide whether to feed it or diffuse it.
So what does this all mean? How does a listener take this incredibly detailed map of their nervous system and apply it to their life tomorrow morning?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it fundamentally redefines what we consider emotional maturity. Think about how society usually views emotional regulation. We tend to think the mature person is the stoic one.
The person who never breaks a sweat.
The person who doesn't cry during an argument, doesn't get visibly angry, doesn't tremble during a presentation. We culturally equate composure and numbness with being well-regulated.
But according to this framework, the absence of visible activation doesn't mean you are actually integrated or mature.
It might just mean you are suppressing everything.
Or avoiding challenging situations in life, or that your nervous system is just completely exhausted and shut down.
Maturity is not the elimination of emotion. Starr defines it as the capacity to remain coherent in its presence. It is about having the structural capacity to observe the sequence happening in real time without losing your sense of self.
It's the difference between capacity and control. If you have limited emotional capacity, an emotional surge feels overwhelmingly dangerous.
The simulation takes over, the body confirms it, and you just react reflexively, usually lashing out or shutting down.
A person with greater capacity might feel the exact same intensity of emotion or even greater intensity.
The difference is that observation remains available to them in the heat of the moment.
They can widen their attention to the room, they can pace their breathing, they can allow their body to carry the heavy, uncomfortable feeling without letting the cognitive narrative spiral out of control into catastrophizing.
It brings to mind an analogy from the text. It's the difference between being swept away by a rushing river and standing firmly within the current.
You're still in the water.
You still feel its immense force pushing against you. But you aren't drowning in it. You are standing within it.
That is true psychological stability. And the more you practice recognizing that choice point, noticing the tight chest, feeling your feet on the floor, and deciding whether to elaborate or widen, the more that capacity strengthens.
You stop being so frightened of your own internal states because you realize sensations are just signals. They aren't verdicts.
Sensations are just signals, not verdicts. That is the perfect encapsulation of this entire framework. As we wrap up this deep dive, let's pull all these threads together for you.
Emotional activation is not a fate that you just have to blindly endure.
It is not a spontaneous eruption from nowhere. It is a highly organized sequence. Your mind constructs a meaning or a simulation, your nervous system mobilizes around that meaning to protect you, and your internal bodily sensations feed back into the loop to confirm the story.
But by practicing meta-awareness, by noticing the sequence forming in your body, you find the choice point.
You gain the agency to either elaborate the feeling when you genuinely need to metabolize a major event, or widen your attention to the present moment to preserve your battery. You can actively participate in your internal life rather than just being a victim to it.
It is deeply empowering to know that while you cannot stop your body from responding to thought, you can absolutely mature your relationship to that response.
And we want to leave you with a final, provocative thought to mull over today, building directly on Professor Starr's insights. Think about this. If your body acts as a literal, biological interpreter of the thoughts and symbolic threats,
if your nervous system genuinely doesn't know the difference between a real physical threat and an imagined one,
how much of your daily resting physiology is being shaped by the media you casually consume? How much unnecessary adrenaline are you pumping into your system during those hypothetical arguments you have in your head while taking a shower?
or what about the vocabulary you use to describe your daily stressors to yourself?
Exactly. If meaning organizes the body, what meaning are you feeding yours today?
A profound question to take with you into the rest of your week.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture of emotional activation. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and we will see you on the next deep dive.
This has been The Psychology of Us. The work presented here is part of a public psychological archive by R.J. Starr. It is educational and interpretive, not clinical or advisory. Episodes are published as finished reflections and are intended to be encountered as complete works.